Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to round out the point on funding, well, first of all, Ms. Feinberg, congratulations on being named the future administrator. I want to point out that throughout this process and my time on the committee, you've been exceptionally responsive, incredibly helpful to us in so many ways, and I'm very excited to see that you're going to be continuing in this role. On the point on funding, the point is that in the Grow America Act, you included $800 million for commuter rail systems to help them speed up the implementation of PTC, right?
Correct.
The point is, it's not just Amtrak we're worried about. We're worried about all kinds of commuter systems that aren't going to have the money to do this on time, right?
Correct.
In fact, Amtrak's the only one that has their act together on this, right?
Amtrak is the only one that has their act together. I'd say Metrolink is also in good shape, and SEPTA is impressive.
Right. So one of the great tragedies of this accident is that the fact is that Amtrak is in the best position of all of the major rail systems we're concerned about to implement this life-saving technology. And there are real and important questions about what happened here and why. But among them is not some issue of Amtrak lagging behind other systems in its implementation of PTC. Isn't that right?
That's correct. They're ahead of everyone else.
And isn't it therefore beside the point to talk about what Amtrak is doing with respect to the federal funding? The point is that the federal funding is absolutely critical for the other systems like Metro North, where the Spite and Dival crash we know would have been prevented by PTC. And I want to thank you again for approving a $1 billion, $960 million loan for Metro North to get that system moving faster with the installation of PTC, right? And in fact, you worked with us closely on my legislation included in the passenger rail bill with the assistance of Mr. Denham and others, so that we could make explicitly clear that RIF funding is available for all these systems because money's the issue, right?
Correct.
Right. And of all the people who ought to be apologizing for these accidents that keep happening because we don't have the safety systems in place, the United States Congress maybe ought to be at the top of that list. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
I think that would be fair to say.
And I think that when Mr. Boardman comes in here, who is clearly heartsick over this episode and who is doing everything he can and is going to meet this deadline and expresses his heartfelt regret, it might be nice if somebody on this committee expressed the heartfelt regret of the United States Congress for not having its act together in this area and so many others, where the safety of the American people is being compromised because we are dithering instead of investing in our own country. Isn't that fair to say?
Yes.
Thank you. And we've got 30 accidents and 69 deaths and 1,200 injuries, and this is the first one on Amtrak because we haven't had one on Amtrak like this in a quarter century. Isn't that right?
That's right.
So where the funding is most needed is where most of the deaths and most of the injuries are occurring. Isn't that correct?
That's right.
Thank you. So much for whether funding matters for safety. Now, I just have a couple of specific questions, Mr. Boardman. Maybe you can help me out. You said that the northbound trains approach at 80 miles an hour in this junction, and the southbound trains approach at 110 miles an hour. And so they installed a system where they knew they had to slow down at least to get to the derailment speed of 98 on the southbound side. But isn't, in fact, the required speed through that corner 45 miles per hour when you slow down? In other words, you don't just slow down to a speed equal to or less than the derailment speed. You actually go down about half of it, right?
Yeah, we go down to a 50-mile-an-hour speed for a safety measure from the 98.
And so can you help me understand then, if that's the case, the recommended speed going northbound, even though the approach is below the derailment speed, it's not recommended that you take it at 80, even though you won't derail till 98, right?
No, and we've been going around that corner since the 30s in this same construct that's there without this code system.
But at what speed should an engineer take that corner?
50 miles an hour.
Northbound?
Yes.
50. And so it was just an oversight not to put the ATC system there to force the reduction in speed to 50?
No. What had happened because of the Back Bay incident, the entire community of safety folks, along with the regulator, looked at what was reasonable for us as an industry to do, and that what was reasonable is to make sure that we put in 6 locations a code change, because the only code change you could really do was down to 45 miles an hour, and that was where you were approaching at a speed that would overturn the train in the corridor.
Okay, I see.
and not the other way.
And that's what we're working on now, is we're
Yes,
going
sir.
to close that gap. Last question, in just a couple seconds left. Mr. Hart, could you just tell us again in plain English why we don't know whether this operator was on the phone 3 weeks after the accident? You said it was a time zone issue. Can't we just get the records? I mean, do we have the records? And if so, wouldn't we know whether he's on the phone?
We do have the records. The engineer was very cooperative. He even gave us the password to his cell phone. So we do have all that. As we peeled the onion, we found more and more complicated issues relating to the fact that the text was on one time zone, the voice is on another time zone, the carrier has all the time zones. So it turned out to be far more complicated than anybody anticipated.
But we will be able to determine,
Yes.
beyond peradventure, whether the phone was being operated at the time of the accident or shortly before.
Yes.
And when do
be
you
able to coordinate that with a number of different time sources to make sure to verify the accuracy of it, because that's very, very crucial to get that right, obviously.
All right. Well, and thank you, sir, for the extraordinary work your agency does. I've seen
Thank
it
you.
up close in the Metro North crash, and it's really extraordinary how professional and how efficient you guys are. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms.